in Red Hook, Brooklyn, where cracked bricks face glittering penthouses across the water, a tired single mother buys a ruined house nobody wants and is mocked for dreaming above her station. Stay with this story because in the dust and cold, something hidden will test loyalties, heal old scars, and turn humiliation into quiet honor. Subscribe, like, and tell us where you're watching from. On a wind-stung afternoon in Red Hook, the harbor's salt smell traveled up Van Brunt Street and slipped through the broken windows of number 214. The house breathed cold air like an old chest wheezing open. Floorboards muttered, plaster dust coated the tongue, and a gray light pressed through torn curtains. Ana Morales, jacket too thin for February, set a plastic toolbox on the warped sill and listened to the distant groan of the F train, the clink of rigging from the docks, the rattle of loose window panes. She ran her thumb over a splinter and steadied herself on the scarred banister. Behind her stood Sterling Whitman, smooth coat, sharp shoes untouched by the damp, the sharp citrus of his cologne cutting through the mildew. "You bought this?" he asked, voice bright with disbelief. "Congratulations, miss." Morales. A money pit is still a pit. The way his laugh slipped into the empty hallway made the walls seem thinner. He gestured at the sagging door that wouldn't meet the frame. "Some homes aren't meant for anyone." Anna lifted her chin. "Some homes need someone to love them first." Whitman's smile hardened. He represented a developer with glossy brochures of glass towers promised for the neighborhood, rendering sheets rustling like flags in the wind. "When the inspectors condemn it, don't say I didn't warn you." From the sidewalk, Maya's sneakers squeaked in the lingering slush. "Mommy, can I come in?" Her breath rose like steam in the doorway. Anna nodded and held out her hand. The child's palm was warm despite the cold. Whitman turned the gold clasp on his leather briefcase and snapped it shut. The sound echoed off the brittle walls. He stepped back onto the stoop, looked down at Anna as if she were a smudge on the glass of the city, and left a silence behind him, heavy, humming, and full of what he thought she did not deserve. Anna had grown up in the sound of laundromat drums and church bells, in the warm exhale of bodegas where the coffee tasted like courage, and the bell above the door chimed out small mercies. Her mother, who cleaned offices at night, left her a snow globe with a tiny Brooklyn bridge inside. The glass cracked years ago, water long evaporated, glitter clinging to the arch like frost that never melted. She kept it wrapped in a handkerchief in her bag, proof that beauty could be carried even when it leaked. She'd lost more than she could list on a single breath. A husband who walked away, a second job when the restaurant closed, the seamstress boss who loved her like a daughter and died in a late summer heatwave. What remained were the steady rituals. Maya's hand in hers on the walk to PS 27, the steam of arroz con pollo on winter evenings, the whisper of prayers at St. Mary's Star of the Sea. The city's smells, yeast from the bakery, diesel from delivery trucks, roasted peanuts near Atlantic Avenue, braided themselves around her days. Mr. Alvarez from the corner store had seen her study housing listings with a afraid patience. He lent her a folding chair at the auction and told her to breathe. "A dream needs a place to sit," he'd said, pressing cafecito into her palm. She bid on the ruined house because the price was within the reach of someone who counted coins and hope with the same careful fingers. That night in the cold house, a space heater ticked like a nervous heart. Maya, curled into her coat, traced patterns in the dust with a stick. Swirls, stars, a lopsided bridge. "We can make it pretty," she whispered. Anna kissed her hair and tasted the faint sweetness of shampoo and winter air. Even as the floor popped and the wind whistled through the broken sash, she believed, stubbornly, tenderly, that change could begin with hands and patience. 2 weeks later, the inspector came with a clipboard and a cough that smelled of mints. He tapped walls, frowned at the ancient wiring, and circled leaks in blue. Each scratch of his pen felt like a door closing. The official notice, paper sharp and pink against the gray day, warned of fines and possible condemnation. Whitman's driver idled at the curb, exhaust ghosting into the air, while Sterling himself stood with an umbrella and a sympathetic tilt of his head. "You see?" he murmured, voice as smooth as the polished handle. There are places meant for better stories. A drip from the ceiling kept time with Anna's dread, plink, plink, into a bucket that smelled of iron and old rain. Emotions crowded her chest like furniture in a narrow hallway. There was nowhere to put the fear, the pride, the shame that Whitman's glance tried to loop around her neck. Rent for a temporary place would gut her savings. Without heat, Maya's breath puffed into the cold room like question marks. The risk of losing the house would mean splitting their lives again into bags and borrowed couches. That night, the radiator clanged, then quieted. Anna sat on a step, the wood cool and familiar under her legs, and looked at the framed photo she'd taped to the wall. Her mother, laughing under summer light, a paper fan blurring her hand. The cracked snow globe waited in her palm, glitter shifting like slow stars. "Tell me what to do," she whispered, voice a thread that might snap if pulled. Maya, unable to sleep, wandered with her flashlight. She hummed the melody her abuela used to sing, soft, almost a breath. "Mommy," she called, "something's rattling." A loose board near the baseboard trembled with every truck passing on Van Brunt. The metal rattle was faint but certain, like a key forgotten in a drawer, finally remembering its job. It was Maya who wedged her fingers under the board and lifted. The air underneath was cold as a cellar. Dust lifted in a thin river, making their throats itch with the taste of old paper. Beneath the plank lay a tin box, edges dented, painted with a faded depiction of the Brooklyn waterfront. Sloops on gray water, gulls frozen in a white sky. "Treasure," Maya breathed, not with greed, but with the holiness of discovery. When Anna touched the lid, it was dry and chalky. The hinge squealed like a small animal startled awake. Inside lay envelopes tied with twine, a stack of old bank certificates that crisped when their edges rubbed, and a letter on thick paper that smelled faintly of lavender and attic heat. The handwriting looped with care. It spoke of the house's former owner, a reclusive dressmaker named Etta Bloom, who had made gowns for women on both sides of the water when Manhattan wanted silk and Red Hook wanted bread. Etta had no children, but had planned for a future she could not see, setting aside shares and bonds across decades that had grown like ivy in a forgotten summer. "For the woman who loves this house enough to stay," the letter read, notarized with a seal that pressed a sunburst into the paper. "For the mother who makes a room safe again. Use it to keep the doors open, to be shelter, to be bread." Anna's hands shook. Numbers leaped like fish in her mind, impossible yet inked in official fonts. Accounts and bearer instruments, consolidated and held, now amounted to $200 million. Her first instinct was neither thrill nor fear, but awe. A deep quiet, like standing in the nave of a church when the organ rests and you hear only your own breath. She looked at Maya, whose flashlight beam shook a little. "We'll check everything," Anna said, voice steadier than her pulse. "We'll be careful. And we'll do what's right." Hope did not burst. It unfolded, careful, reverent, as the house exhaled a draft that smelled less of rot and more of rain about to break. Morning brought a thin sunlight that made the tin box glow like a forgotten coin. Anna had not slept. She'd spread the papers on the kitchen floor, studying each one by the light of her phone, afraid to believe too quickly. She held each document to the window as dawn arrived, checking watermarks, feeling the texture of official seals, reading the same words until they blurred. Maya slept on a nest of blankets nearby, her breath a rhythm Anna matched when her own lungs forgot their work. The phone felt heavy in Anna's hand as she dialed her cousin Elena, who worked at a law firm in the city. "I need someone who understands old financial papers," she said, voice low to keep from waking Maya. "Someone who can tell me if they're real." Elena's silence filled the line. "This is about the house, isn't it?" "Anna, if it's condemned." "It's about hope," Anna interrupted. "About something unexpected." She looked at the letter, at Etta Bloom's name written in ink that had faded to the color of dried roses. "It's about a woman who might have left something behind." By afternoon, Elena arrived with Marco Diaz, a financial advisor who smelled of coffee and wore a suit that had seen better days, but still carried dignity in its seams. His glasses caught the light as he bent over the documents, lips moving silently as he read. The kitchen was warmed only by their bodies and the weak sun, but no one complained of the cold. There was a reverence in the room, as if they stood in the presence of something holy. "These are legitimate," Marco said finally, removing his glasses. His voice was soft with wonder. "Bearer bonds, stocks in companies that have grown 1,000-fold, accounts that have compounded interest for decades. This Etta Bloom, she was either very lucky or very prescient." Elena put her hand on Anna's shoulder. "It's real, Prima." All of it. Anna felt the world shift beneath her, plates of her life realigning. She thought of Whitman's condescending smile, of the pink notice of condemnation, of Maya's question marks of breath in the cold, of her mother's photo on the wall. "What do I do now?" she asked. Marco's eyes were kind behind his glasses. "First, we secure everything. Then, we go to the city clerk to validate and register the transfer. After that," he gestured to the house around them, to the peeling wallpaper and sagging ceilings. "After that, you decide what this place becomes." That night, Anna told Maya only that they might be able to fix the house after all. The child's eyes widened, hope dawning like sunrise. "Does that mean we can stay? Forever?" Anna brushed her daughter's hair from her forehead, feeling the smooth skin beneath her fingers. "It means we have choices now. Good ones." They slept better that night, the space heater's warmth a small sun in the darkness. Anna dreamed of doors opening, of rooms filled with light, of a woman in an old dress sewing futures into the hem of a gown. She woke once to the sound of the house settling, but it didn't feel like breaking anymore. It felt like the building was finding its place again, remembering how to stand straight. Morning arrived with a clatter of workmen outside, setting up scaffolding on the building across the street. Whitman's new development, breaking ground despite community protests. Anna watched from the window as he emerged from a sleek car, his coat catching the light like a blade. He looked up at her house, at the windows where she stood, and his face showed nothing but the certainty that her failure was imminent. Anna held the snow globe to the light, watching how the cracked glass bent the rays. The tiny bridge inside stood firm despite the missing water, despite the broken container. Some things remained even when their world changed shape. "Mommy," Maya called from downstairs. "Someone's at the door." It was Mr. Alvarez, a paper bag of still warm pan dulce in his hands. "Breakfast," he said simply. "And Faith." He looked past her too, the exposed beams, the worn floors. "This house has good bones, like you." Anna invited him in, set out plates on a wobbly table. The sweet bread smell filled the cold kitchen like a memory of summer. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than the bread. Mr. Alvarez nodded as if he heard everything she didn't say. "When do you meet with the city people about the condemnation notice?" Anna felt the weight of the tin box where she'd hidden it again, secure beneath a different floorboard. "Monday," she said. "But I think things might change." The old man's smile deepened the lines around his eyes. "Some storms come to clear the path," he said, touching her hand briefly. His fingers were warm from carrying the bread. "Some hardships come to show us our strength." As he left, Anna stood on the stoop and watched Whitman's workers across the street. For the first time since buying the house, she didn't feel the cold. When the city clerk's office opened on Monday, the linoleum still held last night's cleanser, lemon bright and a little bitter. Fluorescents hummed, paper slid, a radiator hissed like a cat. Whitman arrived in a coat that caught the light, his lawyer at his side, papers prepared to push the condemnation forward. Neighbors trickled in, Mr. Alvarez carrying a brown paper bag with pastries, Mrs. O'Leary from around the corner in a scarf knit green as river water, two teachers from PS 27 with coffee lids that clicked. They filled the benches with the rustle of coats and quiet, loyal breathing. Anna stood at the counter with the tin box, photocopied, cataloged, lettered. The clerk, a woman with chipped nail polish the color of robin's eggs, read Etta Bloom's documents in a silence that thickened and then thinned like fog lifting. A specialist was called, Another, hands in suits traced seals, checked registries, confirmed signatures from decades ago. The room's smell changed. Sudden to toner and warm plastic as records printed and stacked. The sum was repeated softly, then more firmly, like a word taught to a child. 200 million. Whitman's lawyer cleared his throat, coughed, and adjusted a cufflink. Sterling leaned on the counter with studied ease. "It cannot be," he began, but the clerk's gaze stopped him with a gentle firmness reserved for people who mistake volume for truth. "Sir," she said, "this is valid." Anna did not scold or gloat. She thanked the clerks by name. She set the snow globe on the counter. A moment, the cracked glass catching a fluorescent flicker, and spoke clearly so the recorders picked up every word. This money was meant to keep a door open. It will. Outside, the winter sun struck the harbor, making the water look like hammered metal. Reporters would come later. For now, there was only the wind flapping a corner of a posted notice, the brisk smell of bagels from the shop on the corner, and a neighborhood witnessing a woman being seen. Whitman stepped back, pride thin as paper in the cold, exposed not as a villain, but as a man who had forgotten what a home was for. That evening, as darkness settled like a blanket over Red Hook, Anna sat with Maya at their kitchen table, still wobbly, but now holding the weight of plans drawn in colored pencil. Blue for plumbing repairs, green for the garden they would plant when spring arrived, red for the community room Maya suggested, where children could read and do homework after school. "Will we be rich forever?" Maya asked, fingers smudged with green wax. Anna touched her daughter's hair, feeling the silk of it against her palm. "We'll be safe," she said, "and we'll make sure others can be safe, too." She thought of Etta Bloom, of hands sewing dresses for women who needed to feel beautiful in a hard city, of a woman alone planning for strangers she would never meet. The money isn't just for us. The next morning, a parade of trucks arrived. Plumbers, electricians, carpenters with ladders and tool belts that jingled like wind chimes. Anna had called them all before dawn, voice steady as she explained what needed fixing first. Heat for the cold rooms, new windows to keep out drafts, repairs for the roof that leaked memories into buckets. The workers' boots clomped on floors that would soon stop sagging. Their voices filled the house with a different kind of echo. Not emptiness, but intention. Whitman's car idled across the street as the work began. Anna saw him watching through the windshield, his face a mixture of confusion and something that might have been respect. She raised her hand in a small wave, not triumph, but acknowledgement. He nodded once, then drove away. His development would continue down the block, but number 214 would stand its ground, a reminder that not everything needed to be torn down to be made new. By afternoon, the house had begun to breathe differently. Warm air circulated where cold had pooled for years. The front door, adjusted and rehung, closed with a solid click that sounded like certainty. Maya ran from room to room, watching the transformation with wide eyes, occasionally touching a wall as if to assure the house that everything would be all right. Mr. Alvarez arrived with a pot of arroz con gandules that steamed in the suddenly warm kitchen. Mrs. O'Leary brought a quilt she'd been saving, blue and green patches stitched with care, and draped it over the back of a chair that no longer wobbled. "Welcome home," she said, her Irish accent making the words sound like a blessing. That night, as Maya slept in a room now properly heated, Anna sat at the kitchen table with Marco and Alana, planning the foundation that would bear Etta Bloom's name. "The money needs to help people who need doors opened," Anna said. "People who count coins and hope with the same fingers." She thought of single mothers like herself, of immigrant families saving for first homes, of neighborhoods fighting to stay whole against the tide of development that threatened to wash away their history. "We'll set it up right," Marco promised, glasses reflecting the warm kitchen light. "Transparent, sustainable, a legacy." Elena squeezed Anna's hand. "You've always been strong," she said. "Now you get to be strong for others, too." Spring arrived sooner than expected. Or perhaps it was just that Anna noticed it more, now that hope wasn't such a fragile thing. Crocuses pushed through dirt in the small front yard where Maya had planted bulbs with Mrs. O'Leary. The sidewalk in front of number 214 was swept clean each morning. Windows gleamed. The front door, painted a deep blue that reminded Anna of the harbor at dusk, opened and closed for neighbors who came with questions about housing assistance, about roof repairs, about the community garden breaking ground where a vacant lot had collected trash. One afternoon, as Anna sorted applications for the first round of housing grants, a knock came at the front door. She opened it to find Sterling Whitman, his coat a little less crisp than she remembered, his smile a little less certain. "Miss Morales," he said, nodding formally. "I came to see what you've done with the place." Anna stepped back, allowing him to enter. The entryway no longer smelled of mold and abandonment, but of lemon oil and fresh paint. Etta Bloom's letter hung framed on the wall, the sunburst seal catching light. The floors gleamed with new varnish. Through the doorway to the front parlor, bookshelves lined the walls, already half filled with donations for the lending library. "It's becoming what it was meant to be," Anna said simply. "A home. A shelter." Whitman's gaze traveled the repaired banister, the gleaming woodwork. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "And this house." Anna nodded, accepting the words without need for more. "Some places just need the right kind of love," she said, "like people do." As he left, Anna stood on the stoop and watched him go. The harbor wind carried the salt smell of possibility. In her pocket, the cracked snow globe pressed against her palm. A reminder of what breaks and what holds, of beauty that survives despite the cracks. Above her, number 214 stood solid against the sky, its windows reflecting clouds that moved like stories being written and rewritten, endlessly with hope. Spring arrived with thunderheads that rolled in from the bay and the smell of wet brick and lilacs. Number 214 learned to be warm again. Windows opened with a squeal and then a sigh. Fresh paint let off its clean, sweet scent. The house settled into a rhythm of footsteps and laughter, of soup simmering and keys hung by the door. Anna created the Bloom House Fund and kept Etta's letter in a frame by the entryway, the seal catching light like a coin at noon. She restored the home, and then the homes around it. One roof, one furnace, one dignified front step at a time. The first meeting of the foundation board happened around Anna's kitchen table, now steady on new legs. Marco brought financial projections, printed on crisp paper that smelled of toner. Elena arrived with legal frameworks and bylaws drafted in her precise handwriting. Mr. Alvarez represented the neighborhood association, his weathered hands folded over a notebook filled with names, families who needed help with repairs, elderly neighbors whose fixed incomes couldn't stretch to cover leaking roofs, young couples priced out of first homes by developers like Whitman. "We start small," Anna said, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs that steamed in the morning light. "We learn as we go. But we help real people with real needs." The foundation office opened in what had once been number 214's front parlor. Anna hung a sign, hand-painted by Maya. The Bloom House Fund, opening doors since 2025. Inside, filing cabinets gleamed. A computer hummed on a desk by the window where Anna could see children walking to school, elderly neighbors moving at the pace of memory, delivery trucks bringing the rhythm of commerce to Van Brunt Street. The first grant went to the Rodriguez family 3 doors down, a new furnace to replace one that had wheezed through its final winter. Anna watched as the installers carried out the rusted hulk and brought in something that shone like possibility. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose arthritis bent her fingers like twigs after frost, held Anna's hands in the doorway. "Now my grandchildren can visit without wearing coats inside," she said, voice thick with emotion that needed no translation. The second grant went to the Murphy family across the street, roof repairs before another rainy season could steal more of their security. Mr. Murphy, a subway conductor whose uniform always smelled faintly of metal and electricity, stood on his stoop as the workers unloaded their ladders. "I was saving," he said to Anna, "but it was taking too long." The water was winning. His gratitude wasn't in his words, but in the way his shoulders relaxed, unburdened by the weight of a problem too heavy to carry alone. Word spread through Red Hook like seeds scattered by a careful gardener. Applications arrived. Some typed with careful precision, others handwritten with pencils pressed hard enough to emboss the paper. Anna read each one at night after Maya slept, learning the geography of need that mapped her neighborhood. Leaking windows, dangerous wiring, steps that threatened elderly ankles, walls that held black mold like dark secrets. Behind each problem stood families who wanted the same thing, a safe place that held them without judgment. Whitman's development continued down the block, steel beams rising, glass walls promising views of a harbor that had fed the neighborhood for generations. His workers passed Anna's house each morning, thermoses of coffee steaming in the cool air. Some nodded with a respect born of shared early hours. One day, the site foreman, a man with hands like topographical maps and a voice scraped by cigarettes, stopped Anna as she swept her stoop. "That old place?" he said, gesturing to number 214 with a chin that had seen too much weather. "You've brought it back from the dead." Anna smiled, leaning on her broom. "It was never dead." "Just waiting." The foreman laughed, a sound like stones tumbling. "Don't tell my boss I said this, but..." He lowered his voice. "Your way of fixing things makes more sense than tearing everything down." By summer, Anna had hired 2 staff members for the foundation. Jasmine, a recent graduate from the neighborhood with a degree in urban planning, and a laugh that made the office plants seem to lean toward her, and Tony, a retired accountant whose spectacles caught the light like minnows in a stream. They worked at desks facing each other, paperwork flowing between them like a tide. Applications in, approvals out, contractors scheduled, inspections arranged. Maya spent afternoons at the office after school, doing homework at a small table near the window. She knew the names of every applicant, drew pictures for their refrigerators, left handwritten notes in grant folders. "I hope your house feels better soon." Sometimes she sat with Anna during home visits, her quiet presence a reminder of why this work mattered. Children deserved walls that kept out rain, floors that didn't threaten ankles, air that didn't carry mold spores on invisible currents. One evening, as Anna locked the office door, Maya pointed to the house across the street where the Rodriguez grandchildren were visiting, visible through windows that no longer needed plastic sheeting in winter. "Mommy," she said, "do you think Etta is watching us?" Anna looked up at the sky, at clouds turning pink with sunset. "I think she built something that outlasted her," she said after a moment. "That's a kind of watching." That night, as crickets sang in the small garden they'd planted behind number 214, Anna sat on the back steps and felt the smooth wood beneath her legs. The house no longer creaked with uncertainty. It stood solid around her family, around the work that had grown from Etta's legacy. When she closed her eyes, she could almost feel the presence of the dressmaker. Not a ghost, but the echo of intention rippling forward through time like a stone dropped in still water. "Thank you," Anna whispered to the night air that smelled of earth and possibility. "I'll pass it on." Inside, Maya slept in a room painted the color of sunrise. The snow globe, still cracked, still beautiful, stood on a shelf beside a small collection of treasures. A feather, a smooth stone from the harbor, a picture frame holding a photo of Anna's mother. Old beauty beside new hopes, telling a story of continuity, of doors that opened and stayed open. Autumn painted red hook in russets and golds, leaves skittering along Van Brunt Street like whispered conversations. 1 year had passed since Anna found the tin box beneath the floorboards. Number 214 now stood as a beacon, its brick facade repointed, its windows gleaming, its blue door opening and closing like a heartbeat for the neighborhood. Inside, the foundation had expanded beyond the front parlor to fill the first floor with purpose. Meeting rooms where families consulted with housing advocates, a computer lab where children completed homework after school, a kitchen that filled the street with the scent of community meals every Wednesday. On a crisp October morning, Anna stood on her stoop and watched a parade of city officials arrive. The mayor in a coat too light for the weather, the housing commissioner with a portfolio tucked under one arm, community board members whose faces showed the fatigue of too many meetings and too few solutions. They had come to see what the papers had begun calling the Red Hook Renaissance, a neighborhood healing itself from the inside out, one building at a time. "Miss Morales," the mayor said, extending a hand that had shaken too many others that morning. I've heard remarkable things about your work. Anna smiled and opened the blue door. It's not my work alone, she said simply. Come see what neighbors can do together. Inside, maps covered the walls of the main office. Street grids marked with colored pins showing completed projects, ongoing renovations, future plans. Jasmine stood beside a display of before and after photographs. Sagging porches now straightened, crumbling stoops rebuilt, gardens blooming where trash had collected. Tony distributed folders containing financial summaries, impact assessments, metrics that measured success not in profit margins, but in families who could stay in their homes and children who slept warm through winter nights. The model is sustainable, Anna explained, as the official studied the materials, with expressions ranging from skepticism to wonder. We don't just fix houses. We create payment plans that respect dignity. Some homeowners contribute labor instead of money. Others pay it forward by helping neighbors. The point is keeping communities whole, not just buildings. The housing commissioner adjusted her glasses, squinting at a budget projection. And the funding? $200 million is substantial, but not infinite. Anna nodded toward the window where Mr. Alvarez could be seen sweeping his sidewalk, Mrs. Rodriguez watering plants on her newly repaired stoop, children in bright jackets playing on a street that felt safer than it had in decades. We've attracted additional donors. Corporations seeking community goodwill. Foundations that recognize that stable housing changes everything else. School performance, public health, economic mobility, and, she hesitated, then continued, developers who've come to understand that renewal doesn't have to mean replacement. At that, several officials exchanged glances. Everyone knew that 3 of Whitman's planned glass towers had been scaled back, redesigned to include affordable units after months of negotiation with the Bloomhouse Fund. The developer himself had been spotted at community meetings, his sharp suits unchanged, but his approach softening at the edges. After the officials departed, making promises that sounded sincere but would need to be tested by time, Anna walked through the neighborhood with Maya. They passed the community garden where sunflowers had nodded through summer and pumpkins now waited for Halloween carving. They stopped at the corner bodega where Mr. Alvarez stocked local produce alongside the usual necessities. They waved to Mrs. and Mrs. O'Leary, who taught knitting classes in the community room each Thursday, her arthritic fingers still nimble with yarn and needles. Do you remember what it was like before? Anna asked Maya, who skipped beside her, sneakers scuffing fallen leaves. The girl thought for a moment, her breath making small clouds in the cooling air. I remember being cold, she said finally, and you being worried all the time. She looked up at her mother. And I remember the snow globe with the broken glass. Anna smiled, taking Maya's hand as they crossed the street. Some things we fix, some things we just love as they are. That evening, as darkness settled over the harbor and lights winked on across the water, a different kind of gathering filled number 214. Neighbors arrived with covered dishes that steamed in the crisp air. Mrs. Rodriguez's arroz con gandules, Mr. Murphy's Irish stew, Mrs. O'Leary's soda bread. They came with stories and laughter, with children who ran through rooms once cold and empty, with elders who remembered Red Hook before urban renewal had taken its first bite from the neighborhood's edges. In the kitchen, now expanded to accommodate community meals, Anna stirred a pot of her mother's sancocho, the broth rich with root vegetables and the memory of hands that had taught her to cook. Elena helped set out plates that didn't match but somehow belonged together. Mr. Alvarez poured drinks and told stories that made even the teenagers look up from their phones. Maya moved among the guests like a small ambassador, connecting people who might otherwise have remained strangers. Later, as the gathering spilled onto the back patio where string lights twinkled above tables built by neighborhood volunteers, Sterling Whitman arrived, not in his usual sleek car but on foot, carrying a bottle of wine and an uncertainty that made him seem more human than Anna had ever seen him. I hope I'm not intruding, he said, standing at the edge of the light. I received an invitation. Anna glanced at Maya, who smiled innocently. The child had insisted on delivering invitations to every business owner in the area, including the development company whose office occupied a renovated warehouse by the docks. "You're welcome here," Anna said, taking the wine and gesturing toward an empty chair. "This is a night for neighbors." Whitman sat stiffly at first, a splash of expensive fabric among well-worn comfort. But as the evening progressed, as stories circled the tables and laughter rose like steam into the night air, something in him seemed to loosen. He spoke with Mr. Murphy about the challenges of the subway system, listened to Mrs. Rodriguez describe how her grandchildren now visited weekly since her home stayed warm, asked Maya about her school projects with a genuine interest that made the girl bloom like a flower turning toward light. Near midnight, as the gathering thinned and neighbors departed with hugs and promises to return, Whitman helped stack chairs on the patio. His coat was draped over a railing, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms rarely exposed to honest work. "You've created something remarkable here," he said quietly to Anna, who was collecting plates flecked with the remains of shared food. "Not just the foundation. This sense of place." Anna looked around at the home that had once seemed beyond saving, at the neighborhood that had begun to heal its own wounds. "Everyone needs to belong somewhere," she said, "to have a door that opens for them." Whitman nodded, his usual polished certainty replaced by something that looked like reflection. "I've been thinking about my next project," he said, "about how it might better serve the community that's already here." Anna smiled, neither victorious nor surprised. Change came in many forms, sometimes as dramatic as a fortune hidden beneath floorboards, sometimes as subtle as a developer learning to see value in something he once would have demolished without a second thought. "We should talk," she said, offering her hand, "about doors that can open both ways." 5 years passed like pages turning in a well-loved book. Red Hook breathed differently now, still carrying the salt smell of the harbor, still echoing with the rumble of trucks and the distant horns of ships, but now threaded through with new rhythms. The buzz of community gardens where vegetables grew in soil tested and remediated by the Bloomhouse Fund. The chatter of children in renovated playgrounds. The steady percussion of hammers as homes were repaired rather than replaced. Number 214 had grown beyond its original walls. The house next door, once abandoned, its windows like blind eyes, had been joined to Anna's home through a glass corridor that caught sunlight and turned it into warmth. The combined buildings now house the expanded foundation offices, meeting spaces, and a small museum dedicated to neighborhood history, where Etta Bloom's tin box rested in a glass case beside other artifacts of resilience. Photos of dock workers from the 1950s, immigration papers framed like diplomas, a wedding dress sewn from curtains during fabric rationing. On a September morning warm enough to feel like summer's last embrace, Anna stood in what had once been her kitchen, but now served as a conference room for the foundation. Maps covered the walls, not just of Red Hook, but of other neighborhoods across Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, where the model pioneered on Van Brunt Street had taken root. Red pins marked completed projects. Blue pins showed ongoing renovations. Green pins indicated community spaces reclaimed from abandonment. "The Harlem Grant is confirmed," Jasmine said, placing a document before Anna. Her assistant had grown into a full partner in the work, her urban planning degree supplemented by years of practical wisdom. "They'll be using the blueprint we developed here, renovations that preserve historical character while creating affordable housing for existing residents." Anna nodded, feeling the weight of expansion balanced against the need to remain true to Etta's original vision. "And the apprenticeship program?" 20 new students starting next month, Tony replied, glasses slipping down his nose as he consulted his tablet. "Local kids learning skilled trades from master craftspeople. The retention rate from the first cohort is 93%. Most are already working on foundation projects." Through the window, Anna could see Maya in the garden behind the building, teaching younger children how to harvest tomatoes that glowed like small red lanterns among dark leaves. At 16, her daughter had her own vision for the foundation's future. Environmental initiatives, green building practices, urban agriculture that could feed communities while healing the soil. A knock at the door interrupted Anna's thoughts. Sterling Whitman entered, his hair now threaded with silver, his suit still impeccable but somehow less rigid. Years of collaboration had softened the edges between them. Not friendship exactly, but a mutual respect born of shared commitment to a neighborhood both had come to love in their different ways. The council approved the mixed-use proposal, he said without preamble, setting architectural renderings on the table. 40% affordable housing, street-level commercial spaces reserved for local businesses, and the community center on the corner. He tapped a blueprint showing a building that would rise on a vacant lot near the waterfront. Substantial but not overpowering, with green roofs and solar arrays, with windows that reflected the harbor's changeable light. Anna studied the plans, seeing in them the evolution of a developer who had once viewed Red Hook merely as undervalued real estate. And the hiring preferences for local workers? Written into every contract, Whitman confirmed, along with the training programs we discussed. After he left, Anna walked through the neighborhood that had become both canvas and gallery for what community renewal could look like. She passed homes with solid roofs and sound foundations, gardens where flowers nodded in the September breeze, streets where children played without the shadow of displacement hovering over their games. She nodded to Ms. Rodriguez, now using a cane but still tending her window boxes with careful hands. She waved to Mr. Murphy, retired from the subway but teaching chess to youngsters in the park 3 afternoons a week. At the harbor's edge, where container ships still unloaded goods from distant shores, Anna sat on a bench installed by the foundation. The water rippled with afternoon light, gulls wheeled overhead, and the Manhattan skyline rose across the harbor like a promise both kept and questioned. She removed the snow globe from her bag, still cracked, still treasured, now accompanied by a collection of others that Maya had given her over the years, each commemorating a milestone in their journey. "We kept the doors open, Etta," she whispered to the glass dome where glitter had long ago settled into the cracks. "We became a doorway for others." A shadow fell across the bench, and Anna looked up to find Mr. Alvarez, his pace slowed by age, but his eyes still bright with the light of stories waiting to be told. He sat beside her, bones creaking like floorboards remembering their purpose. "I saw you walking," he said, nodding toward the neighborhood behind them. "Checking on your kingdom." Anna smiled, shaking her head. "Not a kingdom. A community." The old man's laugh was soft as harbor mist. "I remember when you came to the auction," he said. "So serious, counting your dollars like rosary beads." He looked toward number 214, its blue door visible even from this distance. "You saw something others missed." "I saw a home that needed someone to love it," Anna replied, the words echoing across years, across the chasm between who she had been and who she had become. Mr. Alvarez nodded, his gaze traveling the waterfront where new construction rose alongside restored warehouses, where parks bloomed in spaces once fenced and forgotten. "And now others see it too." He patted her hand, his palm warm and dry as bread just cooled. "That's how change lasts, you know, when it opens eyes as well as doors." Evening brought a celebration. 5 years of the Bloomhouse Fund marked by a block party that filled Van Brunt Street with tables and lights, with music that wove Spanish guitar with Irish fiddle, with food that told the story of a neighborhood where cultures braided themselves together like strong rope. Children darted between adults, faces painted with stars and flowers. Teenagers helped elderly neighbors to chairs set in pools of golden light. The mayor arrived without fanfare, mingling with residents who greeted her by name. Maya found Anna at the edge of the gathering, camera in hand, documenting the evening for the Foundation's archives. "Mommy," she said, slipping her arm through her mother's. "Mrs. Amata O'Leary wants to know if you'll say a few words." Anna hesitated, still more comfortable with doing than speaking. But she allowed her daughter to lead her to a small platform where Mr. Alvarez waited with a microphone that squealed once before settling into silence. The street quieted, faces turned toward her like flowers seeking light. 5 years ago, Anna began, voice finding its strength in the stillness. "I bought a house that wouldn't close its doors properly. I was looking for shelter, for a place to hold my family." She glanced at Maya, who smiled encouragement. "What I found instead was a legacy. Not just money, but a vision of what community can be when we refuse to let each other fall. She looked out at the faces illuminated by string lights, neighbors who had become extended family, Whitman standing respectfully at the back of the crowd, foundation staff who carried Etta's vision forward in ways the dressmaker could never have imagined. "We talk about doors a lot at the foundation," Anna continued, "about keeping them open, about making sure everyone has a safe place to return to at night. But I've learned that we ourselves become doorways for others, through how we listen, how we help, how we believe in possibilities that aren't visible yet." The harbor wind carried her words down streets where houses now stood straight and proud, where gardens bloomed in spaces once abandoned, where a neighborhood had remembered how to hold its people close. "Etta Bloom left us more than money," Anna said, her voice steady with the certainty of things proven through doing. "She left us a question. What will you keep open? What will you become a doorway to?" She raised her glass, and the crowd raised theirs in return, lights catching in hundreds of small reflections. To doors that open, to the love that keeps them that way, and to a community that refuses to let anyone stand outside in the cold. Later, as the party wound down and stars appeared above the harbor, Anna and Maya walked home arm in arm. Number 214 waited, its blue door a deeper shade in the evening light, its windows warm with welcome. "Do you think we'll ever know why Etta chose our house?" Maya asked, her voice carrying the thoughtfulness of adolescence. "Why she left everything to a stranger?" Anna looked at her daughter, no longer the child who had traced patterns in dust, now a young woman with plans and visions of her own. "I think she knew that some treasures only grow when they're given away," she said, "and that the true value of a home isn't in its walls, but in how it shelters what matters most." They climbed the steps together, toward the door that had once refused to close, but now opened to a future neither could have imagined. On that cold February day when hope had seemed as fragile as a cracked snow globe, as uncertain as a house with broken windows. Behind them, Red Hook settled into evening rhythms, dishes being washed, children being tucked into bed, stories being told in rooms made safe by care and intention. Anna paused on the threshold, feeling the solid wood beneath her palm, the brass doorknob warm from the day's sun. "The love and the dignity," she whispered, "are treasures no one can steal."